I grew up on a farm. Well, I spent a large part of my childhood on a farm in Tipperary, and there was a dark sky overhead, unlike Dublin, which was, light pollution, you couldn't see anything. I would go to Tipperary and just, millions of stars would just pop into the firmament. I couldn't get over it. I used to lie in the grass at night, just like, because I was a bit of a science geek, and I don't know where my love of space came from, but I was always writing this little booklet, all the information about how fast we were travelling through space, and I just lie there thinking we're just hurtling through space, clinging onto this little planet at thousands of miles an hour, and I used to be dreaming of aliens and Horsehead Nebula, and I was totally besotted. These images filled my mind. I got into science fiction. I wanted to be an astronaut. I was your proper space geek as a child, and I don't really know why. My mother died when I was 4, so I think it's at least possible I had some, early recognition that life was finite, and that what's it all for, and insofar as a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old can have any sort of existential crisis. I think there may well have been a kind of a feeling as a child that I was looking out into deep space and wondering what it was all for, and wondering who was out there, and was she out there, and was there life out there, and was there heaven out there, all those mysterious ideas that children probably kick around when they're alone. So yeah, just great love of it, and it's continued to this day, and telescopes and science films and developing other projects now about space, and then I say love science fiction, write science fiction, just want to direct drama to science fiction, just love all that world, love anything to do with space, anything to do with aliens, anything to do with time travel. I love all of that. I didn't do a traditional film degree. I studied maths and physics in Trinity. Mostly I wanted to work in film, but my father wanted me to get a proper degree. I was a big science and maths fan anyway, so I studied that in Trinity and joined the Film Society in Trinity, where they were making films. And in fact, some of the people that I started making films with in Trinity I still work with today. Alan Gilsonan and Martin Mann, and various filmmakers that I have a long collaboration with. So the very first film I worked on was called Sheila, and it was a short directed by Alan Gilsonan and starring Anne Enright, who went on to become a Booker Prize winner. So it started like that, and then when I left college, became an assistant editor in the kind of tradition of how editing is editors are trained. As an apprentice under an editor, and worked my way up through editing and assistant editing until I started editing on my own. Over the years, while I was an editor, I've been an editor for over 20 years, pretty experienced editor, not an experienced director. So I had directed a number of shorts and over the years, and enjoyed them, and then kept going back to editing for various reasons. And then about 5 years ago, I was asked by John Murray, who is my producer on The Farthest, and at that time he asked me would I co-direct a feature documentary with him called Here Was Cuba. I thought it was a great idea. We worked as a director-editor team for a number of years, and we were a very happy team, very collaborative. So I thought I'd give it a go, directing a documentary. And from the day and hour I started it, I just thought it was so much fun, so intellectually stimulating, so exciting, so dreaming up this way of telling a story, a non-fiction story, and just really, really took to it. So it was brand new, and I really enjoyed that one. And then after we finished that, we were like, well, what else are we going to do? So the next obvious step for me was to direct one on my own, and he produced it along with Claire Strong. And that was obviously, coming out of my real passions. Here Was Cuba is a history film, and I love history and I'm interested, but I didn't, that wouldn't have been where my interest would naturally lie. My interest would more naturally lie in documentaries to do with science and the fate of the world and the end of the planet and all that stuff. So, although Here Was Cuba has some of that too. My experience as an editor, was brought to bear in a lot of ways, because, and I've edited a lot of documentary. The editor in particular, what they'll bring to a documentary, I think, is storytelling. What the editor's voice is loudest for in a documentary is the storytelling, keeping the thing flowing and clarity and momentum and drama and all the key ingredients. So I had all that experience already when I started directing documentary. So in some ways, it was a natural fit for me. But at the time, that was the late 80s, there wasn't the range of film courses in Dublin that there is now. So possibly now I would say do a film course, because there's great range and there's great intellectual rigor in them, and you'll get to get out there with cameras like you guys are today and really, explore your practice from very early on. So I might have been behind the curve in terms of, I really had to catch up later. So I'd probably recommend you doing a film course now. However, doing a regular degree and getting into film is also great fun, and maybe gives you a different way of looking at film. I think the key is, if it's your passion, if you love to do it, watch as many films as you can, read as many film books as you can, read interviews from film directors and artists and actors and writers, and absorb it all. And then probably no matter how you fall into it, you'll probably find your voice. We were making a film that was set mostly in space, where there's no footage. 40 years journey in space with no footage at all. So CGI was always going to have to play a very big role. And as you're saying, a lot of documentaries employ it, or need to employ it, or have the money to employ it. So right from the start, we knew that it was going to have to be a big voice in our film. I mean, the film is a kind of a collage of a lot of different visuals, kind of the original footage we shot of the interviews, and all the kind of the textual stuff, all the design details, archive, Voyager itself's images, and then obviously the CGI. So it was always going to be a kind of a collage, a mosaic of all those visual elements, and the CGI had to fit aesthetically in the design, the vibe we had. So we had a lot of discussions with the key teams. So myself, the cinematographer, the designer, the editor, and the CGI artist, all talking about the visual palette, the visual tone of the film, so that it would be a unified experience, as opposed to you'd be in one type of film and then you'd be in a CGI world that didn't relate. So Ian Benny Kenny, who's IFTA nominated for his work on the Farthest, he started to understand he had to get 3D models of the craft, he had to invent, research and then build all the 3D environments for all the planetary encounters. Then, as I said, we were looking for an aesthetic voice that would fit in with our cinematography. So that involved flair and a different type of camera movement, and we also wanted a lot of energy. So there was a lot of complexity to building these shots, and how we actually physically approached it in terms of making the film was while Ian was designing and creating these images, Tony and myself in the edit kind of drew CGI from other feature films, including Interstellar and Gravity and wherever. And they weren't Voyager craft doing what they were doing, but they were almost like placeholders, or it'd be like a statement of intent. At this point in the story, we want the craft to whiz past Jupiter in this kind of attitude, And so Tony was doing all sorts of really basic CGI in the edit, where he'd kind of paint out the sun and he'd paint in a little Jupiter, and So it was a toing and froing between us and Ian, trying to find how the story would be carried by the CGI and how it would work. And then he was giving us in temp versions of what he was doing, and we were constantly kind of updating them and reworking them, and trying to find the language. So it took us a long time. It was a year-long process of finding how the CGI would fit, what parts of the story you would have to carry, how we wanted it to work in terms of the speed it was going past, the energy, what it was going to say at that moment. So it was long and complex and very, very rewarding. Claire went off initially, and then I joined her, and we went on this kind of research trip where we met all these great scientists and engineers who had worked on Voyager. And as I said, we were looking for the characters who would really tell the story with great life. And look, I had 3 H's over my desk: honesty, humanity and humour, and they were all to do with, we were really looking for these characters who would really let us into their world. They weren't going to sit there giving me the dry facts, but they would actually open up and tell you the human side of the story, what it felt like to be a person at that moment in time with this extraordinary dream. So, we didn't quite have casting for scientists, but we had that we went and met loads of people to say, You know, do you like this vibe? Do we get along? Are you going to be able to, you know, put away your science coat and actually just talk to me like we're just two humans exchanging, you know, telling a great story? And it was really important to me in the film, even though the film was about a specific craft. It's not a metaphor, it's an actual craft that did all this research and adventure and is out there in interstellar space, and its golden record, which really exists. And the third element of the film, and I was very keen to have it in the film, was this kind of, you know, and that probably goes back to the child in me who loves the stars and space. It's kind of the philosophical meanderings about our place in existence. Why are we here? How did it all begin? How will it end? What is out there? Is there anyone out there? Are we alone? Is this the only planet to contain life? All those kind of deep, primal questions that I think certainly they kick off in me, and I actually think they kick off in everybody. That contemplation of space evokes us all. You know, it makes us feel finite. It makes us feel tiny and huge all at the same time. You know, we're part of something bigger, and yet we're alone and tiny, you know. And I fought very hard for those elements to be in the film, those kind of primal questions, and they stayed in the film as a kind of a thread that weaves through the whole story. And I love them, and I love that kind of consciousness expanding conversation that's in the film about why we're here and what's out there. I've been blown away. We've all been blown away by how people respond to the film. You know, it's such an emotional experience watching it with an audience, and practically across the board. And I've seen it maybe hundreds of times with audiences now in festivals all over the world, in all these launches. People just feel, they laugh, they cry, they feel inspired. Kids really get into it, you know, the madness of it, you know, this craft going out there for 40 years all on its own. They anthropomorph, they identify with this little spacecraft. So showing it to audiences I've practically travelled with it since February last year. And you know, as I say, icing on top of icing. I can't get enough of how the audiences really enjoy it, you know. And I don't know if that's a cliche, but that's been the most extraordinary part of making it, because you a bit like Voyager, none of us dreamed how far the film could go. You know, you're afraid to dream. Is it going to touch anyone? Is it going to reach anyone? Will anyone ever see it? Will it ever get out of the traps? And then to find you've made something that actually touches people in their hearts, and people respond. You people take the time to write to us on Twitter and write to us on Facebook and write to us at the production company, you know, pouring out their feelings of how inspired they feel, how uplifted they feel, how insignificant in a good way, you know. So yeah, really showing it has been one of the great adventures and treats of my life. In terms of competing with each other in making the films, I haven't found that at all. I found it to be the opposite, really supportive, people very keen to share information together. Directors in particular, you know, very, very ready to take calls from each other about advice if they need help, or recommending creatives, or helping each other get projects off the ground. So, no, not competitive. No, not. Maybe my eyes are about to get open to that. I don't think so. It seems to be a very, supportive and kind of collegial kind of atmosphere. I mean, it's hard to make a film, you know. So we're all competing with each other for film board funds, and you know, so you have to be on your game. You know, you have to be. If you're submitting something for film board funding, you have to really put your heart and soul into it and work hard. You know, throwing in something half baked won't cut the mustard anymore. You know, there's an awful lot of other people waiting in the wings with really finely thought out projects that are also going for that 150 grand or 600 grand that you're trying to get a hold of, you know, so competitive in that sense. Yeah, I'm developing a couple at the moment. Two of them that I'm writing myself are kind of feminist dystopian sci-fi, and one that I'm working on with another writer, and it's kind of deep space, last woman left alive kind of sci-fi. So I'm kind of open to everything. I as I said, I particularly love time travel. Particularly love space, not like necessarily Earth in the future. Being out in space, I love, but I don't. And I love aliens, but I don't like aliens that look like chicken carcasses or spiders. they all seem to do in the Alien movies. They're all arachnoid, aren't they? Kind of big prawns. One of the film's fans is this wonderful character called Hayden, who's a 7-year-old boy from Belfast, and he asked me the best question that I got asked in this entire journey, all the Q&As I've done. He asked me, were Saturn's rings, did I think that Saturn's rings were an alien's version of a golden record that they made for us?
Oh.
And I was like, now only a child can come up with that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But in that world, the aliens must be ginormous. I was like, right, so we're going to have to make a film with humongous aliens.
Yeah, interesting idea.
I love all science fiction, to be honest. I'm very undiscerning. It's a bad trait. I'll read anything and I'll watch anything. So I love anything that is even vaguely science fiction.
Nice.
A random connection to science fiction and I'll watch it. Feed your creative self. That's the biggest thing you're going to need when you're writing or directing or filming or producing, whatever role you take up in film. Your inner creative self is going to be all over everything you do, the taste you bring to it, how informed you are, knowing what you like, what you don't like. And by that I mean, read all sorts of books, read everything that comes across you, watch all sorts of films, good and bad, documentaries, radio plays, listen to the radio, listen to music, go to plays, go to gigs, walk in the cliff, take up skydiving, take up deep sea diving, experience the world, experience your own self and your imagination and feed it. And then I think you'll make great films, because you'll be an individual, you won't be subject to, the boring list of how films are made and how they should hit audiences in this specific way. You'll have your own voice, and you'll be an author. You'll be an individual. Maybe Hollywood will tell you, don't be an individual. Follow this script plan. But I think that's nonsense. I think and I'm not saying he's even a great hero of mine, because he isn't. Quentin Tarantino, just came out of working in a video store. We wanted to make kind of B movie, and he invented a whole new way of telling film. So I'm just like, feed your inner self, feed your inner creativity, get to know what you like, and do that.
Cool. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the lovely questions.
Yes.